Hello folks, this is the watch I wanted to show you today. It's a Bulova and it is a Homage watch, and it's a homage to something quite interesting. Now the watch is, as far as I'm aware, discontinued, but they're still available on eBay and places like that, and you may actually be able to find them online from time to time. Now this is a quartz movement. You can see the stepped ticking motion with the second hand there. It has Arabic numerals, all of which are loomed, and I can tell you that the loom is actually excellent and lasts all night. Now the watch originally from Bulova did not come with this. This is a aftermarket makes strap, which I featured in an earlier video that I did. I got that from AliExpress, and it looks great on this. It came on a canvas type strap, well, with a leather backing, not a NATO strap, actually a strap with pins. But what happened was the keeper broke, and so I replaced that. The quality of the strap itself was pretty good, but the keeper, I think, was substandard on it. So anyway, I use this now on NATOs or on leather straps, and I do use the watch quite a lot. It has a round dial, a round case, and I'll get you the sizes. And we've got a diagonal of 40.1 millimeters. Now it has a domed acrylic crystal, in keeping with the watches that it's homaging, which are actually the very first ever wristwatches issued to the British Armed Forces in World War II. And you see that's 10.6 millimeters, contributed to mainly by the rather bulbous dome on that acrylic crystal, which is actually a very nice crystal. I've had a few scratches on it over the years, and they've buffed out without any problem at all. So I wouldn't want anybody to go away thinking that acrylic is necessarily inferior to mineral glass or sapphire. All of these things have got pluses and minuses, and acrylic was chosen for these early military watches because it's shatterproof, or at least relatively shatterproof. Anyway, this is my Bulova, and I'll give you the model number, if I can get the camera to focus here. It's a C86073. Is that 36 or 35? 36. And the watch's lug to lug is, there we go, 47.5 millimeters. Now let's have a look at what these watches are a homage to. In the 1940s, the British military sent off a specification to various Swiss watchmakers, because Switzerland was neutral and they were turning out fliegers for the Luftwaffe, but they were also arming us, as it were, with wristwatches. And the specification was sent out was for these things, and there were 12 manufacturers filled the contract, 11 of them fully Swiss companies, and one company called Vertex, which was technically an English watchmaker, but they had their manufacturing plants in Switzerland. Now, because of the World War II connection and the fact that there were 12 manufacturers with skin in the game, these watches have been nicknamed the Dirty Dozen, and they are highly collectible. The they reckon that there are probably only about 20 full collections in the world, because the different manufacturers produced different numbers of watches, and the watches went on to lead quite hard lives on the arms of British servicemen, and they were military property, and they weren't really treated like horological instruments, more like another piece of kit, like, I don't know, an ammunition box or a jerry can. And when they went wrong, they were repaired by an organisation known as the REME, Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. So the same corps of the army that fixed tanks fixed the watches, and they weren't very precious about that. Sometimes they were repaired in quite haphazard manners. Sometimes parts from one watch were used on another, and they were sort of viewed as interchangeable, and, well, they were just bits of kit, really. Some of them did not survive. Others that did survive were available in different varying numbers, and the prices for these at auction can be quite high depending on condition. Now, these ones that I've been lent to make this video aren't brilliant condition wise, because one of the things that's problematic about the watches is these loomed numerals and hands were loomed with radioactive paste. So a watch in its original condition might not be glowing very much now, but it'll certainly still set a Geiger counter ticking. And people that are servicing these watches have to be very careful about the dust that wanders around inside the case, because otherwise you could end up with something very unpleasant lodging itself in your lungs to your serious detriment. One of the offshoots of this is that a lot of these are not in original condition and have been reloomed or had various other jobs done to them. It's not uncommon to find them with, as I said, interchangeable handsets from other watches. And if you have a look at the Vertex here in particular, let's see if I can get a close-up. Yeah. The Arabics have been painted on quite roughly with a brush. So this one couldn't really be counted to be in cracking condition and would need very careful restoration before it achieved a high auction price. On the back of all of these watches, I'll show you both of them, you have the same legend. You have WWW, which stands for Watch Wristlet Waterproof, and the broad arrow underneath it, or crow's foot as it's sometimes called in parlance, which is a stamp that's put on British military property. You'll see this on James Bond Omegas as a nod to his being on Her Majesty's, or His Majesty now's, Secret Service. Underneath that you would get a serial number for the watch, and they're all the same. They were made by a lot of companies that don't exist anymore, but Gégé Lecoultre is one of them. I'll let you see a picture here of the 12 broad arrow manufacturers. Here we go. Right, looking at the watches themselves, I'll give you a quick rundown of the sizes. The diameter of this one is 38.4, so it's quite a bit smaller than the Bulova Homage. Yeah. In keeping with modern tastes, watches have gotten much bigger, when in the World War II era, people didn't feel they had to overcompensate for anything with the wristwatch that they wore. But anyway, there you go. As you see, like the Bulova, it has a domed acrylic crystal. It has lubed Arabics and hands and seconds on a sub-dial at 6 o'clock. This one is a Cyma, and this one here is a Vertex. Later on, these watches were superseded, and the military watches after, although they kept the same layout with light text on a black dial, but this Omega Broad Arrow has a centre seconds hand and is still a small case, 37mm, still a domed acrylic crystal, a manual wound movement. This was before automatic movements were even invented, I think, but this is a later iteration of the British military watch to this one. Now, they were all on what they call general release. They weren't watches that were made for a particular class of soldier, but they weren't issued to all troops because the specification includes a chronometer certified movement, waterproofness, well, up to the standard of the time, and they were reasonably expensive pieces of kit, issued to people who would require them, for example, artillery people and perhaps signals staff who needed an accurate measure of the time. So you weren't a squaddy about to hit the beach at Dunkirk and handed a watch on your way out. It's only some personnel were issued with military watches. Here's another one to the same sort of specification. This one is also an Omega, but not a Broad Arrow one. A bit less collectible. But as you see on the back, there isn't much more. These ones don't have the WWW stamp on them, but you still see the crow's foot and the serial numbers. I find it hard to hold focus here, but there you go. So many thanks to Derek for lending me his collection here of 4 British military watches from the 1940s. Now, I showed you the Bulova watch, which is my take on a Dirty Dozen. But these are quite hard to get, and I actually misled you a little bit on the model number, because the model number of this watch is at 96A102. Now, fun fact, this is a movie watch. It was shown in the 2013 movie White House Down on the wrist of Channing Tatum with its supplied canvas khaki coloured strap. These are difficult to get, and they're quartz movements and they're really faithful to the originals. But if you can't get your hands on one of these or would prefer something a little more faithful, I'm able to help as well. I had a little look and I found this beauty. £126.48 with a hand-wound mechanical movement and an awful lot more faithful to the originals. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little look at field watches from the 1940s, and I think you'll agree it's an interesting little slant for those of you who are into field watches and military watches. Anyway, until the next one, goodbye for now.